think I should just talk about the name creativity theory here.
Yeah.
So
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, I think it's a good place. So you know what I mean by creativity theory. Like, it's not just the company.
Yeah,
name.
we've talked about it a couple times.
It's basically, this is how I view the nature of reality. Creativity theory is not just the name of this podcast or just the name of my company that I do. I do freelance media services currently. That's currently this iteration of the company, and it's not my idea for what I want the company to always be. I want this thing to evolve. I have kind of a plan for it, and a lot of work ahead of me to bring that plan to fruition. But creativity theory is also kind of like my life philosophy. It's how I see the world, and it's my own antidote to quell and create a better alternative to something like nihilism. And it's basically that we create our own reality, or at least we create our own perception of reality. We might not ever be able to know what the true nature of reality is and truly know all the rules and truly understand the origins and how this place works. But I think if we work from the inside out, we can acknowledge that we have created our perception of reality through forms of understanding such as literature and religion and science and philosophy and the amalgamation of all these things. It's a broad understanding of the world, and there's a lot of overlap between a lot of these fields, and there's a lot of discrepancies that we are constantly arguing and trying to iron out. But even in something like science and mathematics that are grounded in reality, we did create as human beings our relationship and our rhetoric around these fields of understanding the world. And it's how we communicate these complicated ideas that are rooted in objective reality with one another. And so even those things are a form of human creation. And the words that we use to communicate with each other are forms of human creation. And these stories, whether they are truly a definitely fictional story like the fucking Harry Potter or a story that maybe atheists will view as pure fiction like the Christian Bible or any other holy book for that matter. And then that the more spiritual and religious types will say this is literal fact.
Yeah.
And then of course all in between, it's like, no, maybe a lot of these things aren't literally true, but they are metaphorically and profoundly true. And there's a lot of true values that the stories are representatives for. So even in all those cases, whether these stories were created by God, whatever you conceptualize God to be, or they were created by human beings or an amalgamation of human beings over time, whether they were created by writing them down and they're just random fictional ideas, or they're created from abstracting our behavior over time and ironing out these values in a very cohesive and beautiful and well thought out and organized way, it's still creations, and they affect our perception of reality. So that's the essence of creativity theory. Is essentially everything is creativity. Everything is creation, and that creativity is divine. To me, I feel creativity is God. Or God is necessarily all creations that are good. God is the creative force that is moving things forward in a way that we define good. And good is also a definition and a word that we've created, and it means a thing.
Yeah.
And bad, like bad is also, there's bad creations. And I don't think something like destruction is necessarily bad. I think destruction is a form of creativity. I think sometimes
destruction can be good.
Destruction can be good if we're destroying a thing that is bad.
Yeah.
But again, our definitions, even on an individual level, of what we think is good and bad are creations of ours, and we shape those, and it is shaped by those around us. And so I think what human beings should be aiming for in this theory is to be aligned with their personal, individual relationship with their creativity. And to me, my experience with it has been when I've fallen out of line with that and I'm not in creative flow, I am miserable. I'm not doing the best I can for myself and the world around me. But when I am creating the best thing that I can create in the moment, and I'm in it and I'm aligned, that is when I'm the best force that I can be. So in an attempt to center my life around this belief, I have created this brand, Creativity Theory, which is, again, it's a company, it's a podcast, it's probably going to expand to a lot of different things. But you can think of it just simply as a brand, and you can think about it as an actual theory for the way I perceive reality, and I think is a good philosophy. And I think it's a way that I can have positive, genuine, true influence on other people. And the other thing I wanted to address, which was me doing this podcast, because I've been thinking about doing a podcast for a long time, and I have always said no to it. Like I love being guests on people's podcasts, but I've always felt like I don't want to be a host for a number of reasons. One, it's work putting together a podcast.
Yeah.
And to be consistent with it, it's really only worth it if you're consistent. Probably. I don't know. Just ideas like that, like kind of pragmatic things. And then also the fact that like everyone's got a fucking podcast. Everyone in a mud these days has got a podcast. So why add to this oversaturated market of podcasts? I don't feel as a podcast host that I really have much to offer. That's been my feelings about it. And I think over the more recent year or two, I've changed my mind on that. And then here's the main thing that I've always thought that I think has really kept me from it is, the way I presented myself publicly up until progressively over the last few years, more and more so, the way I presented myself publicly and in my art forms has been facadical. It's more oriented towards humor rather than truth. I just want to make people laugh. I don't really have much of a I don't really value truth in the way that I didn't value truth in the way that I've come to do now.
Yeah.
And so I think that knowing that if I were to do a podcast, I would be presenting myself genuinely in these long form discussions, and doing so genuinely, I'd be genuine, and it would be very publicly.
Give people the other side to you.
Publicly
the
accessible.
real side. And
I've always been kind of afraid of that. I've been unsure whether or not I want to cross that bridge. And I think that a lot of the art that I've done and that I put out over the past few years has been more and more like from I don't feel well, I need attention, to love songs for absolutely no one, to putting out Camthology, and even a lot of the way like my stand-up has kind of shifted over these years. I feel like I am incorporating and merging the genuine, the truth with the humor. And I don't want people to think that this podcast is going to be all serious all the time. I think we're going to goof around and have fun.
Yeah.
And there's going to be episodes that probably are more on the genuine and just strictly business and truth talk. And
it's going to be more like the Michelle Obama podcast.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely my biggest influence of podcasting is Michelle Obama's podcast.
It's a really good one. You should go check it out.
Yeah.
But after this one.
Yes. Well, no, I would actually recommend check out Michelle Obama podcast before this one. If you haven't checked it out yet and you are, even if there's only like 10 minutes left of this one, stop this.
Fuck it. Maybe Michelle Obama will sponsor, maybe Michelle Obama podcast will sponsor this podcast.
Maybe Michelle Obama will come on and get in the hot seat. That shit turned off again.
We're calling you, Michelle. You are our savior.
Anyway, the main thing that kept me from doing this podcast was I didn't want to present myself genuinely. Had a lot of like trepidation towards that, and that I really wasn't sure I wanted to cross over into that territory. And I think mostly because out of fear of having my, like, being so public, but within a facade, it shields me. Like, I've always shielded myself with my humor. It's like, you can't really criticize me for my jokes.
Yeah.
You don't know what I'm really like. They're like, you're mad at my opinion on that's expressed in that joke. Well, guess what, buddy? It's a fucking joke. I don't actually think that way. But now you have this podcast that is just rich with things I really think, and man, you can just tear me apart after listening to something like this. You can really hate me.
Yeah.
And, or you can really love me, either way. But I think that that reason that I've always not wanted to do this has become my reason for doing it. I think that presenting yourself truthfully and genuinely is good. And I've come to believe that, and I've come to really believe that. And I feel that I have learned that firsthand by slowly pushing more genuine Cameron into the art that was once purely facadical, and then I've been like kind of just slipping more genuine in there, and now it's like, all right,
people aren't even going to notice this change.
Maybe. But that's so now I want to do this because I like having these real conversations, and I think that I need to develop as a person through genuine dialogue, and I need people to call me out on my bullshit. I need to get in arguments.
Yeah.
One thing, like, as much as like I love you and we agree on almost everything.
Yeah,
it
pretty
seems.
much.
I want to have people I disagree with on here. In fact, I would really like to get to a point where I'm having people on here that I have straight up feuds with.
Yeah,
and
that you don't like.
Well, yeah. And I would really like to work out, like, have difficult discussions.
I mean, because you're good at that. You're good at, talking people through shit. You know what I mean?
I do. And I feel like I'm ultimately aimed at peace.
Yeah.
I ultimately don't want to have enemies. And I don't think that it's necessary for me to have enemies. I don't think it's necessary for anyone to really have enemies. I think that a lot of our feuds and disagreements across the board interpersonally are not pointless, but a lot of times unnecessary, and it's mostly just from misunderstanding and miscommunication. And a lot of times it can come from not from people being bad, but people having bad ideas.
Yeah.
People being stuck in an ideology and the reality they've created, either consciously or unconsciously. The reality they are constantly reinforcing on themselves, the lens that they're reinforcing for themselves, it might be a bad lens. A lot of lenses and a lot of ideologies are geared towards seeing people as enemies, seeing people as others, and I think that those are negative ways of viewing the world. I think that they're bad, maladaptive forms of creativity. And
it's because all of us are susceptible to corruption.
All of us are susceptible to corruption. And yeah, I think it's to put that idea to plug it into creativity theory. It's basically like everything is creativity, and there is a broad divine creativity, which is the oneness of everything. It's all that is creativity, and all that is not is creative potential. And you can divide creativity in all sorts of ways. And by the way that we do that is through our words, which is a domain that we have created. We've created a lot of nuance and detail through our language. And it's all, but even in all that detail and nuance, it is all creativity. And we can judge that creativity, and we can feel that creativity. We can feel that it is good and productive, or that it is negative and maladaptive. And I feel that, we need better ideas.